Good morning, everybody. What's going on? Welcome back to Movie Mornings. I'm your host, Martino, and today we are revisiting Guardians of the Galaxy, the very first film of the Guardians of the Galaxy films. It is one of the last films to come out, I believe, in Phase 2 of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and it's going to be a lot of fun to talk about. Directed by James Gunn. Can't wait to get into it here. We did just rewatch it, and by we, I mean myself and the man with the cleanest car in Atlanta right now. It is Mr. Jose Espinel. Jose, how's it going?
What is going on? I am great. I'm glad to be here. I'm glad that we're going to be revisiting these movies. Obviously, we just revisited the first Guardians. We're going to be revisiting the second one. I can't wait to get into these. And as you did say, I do have one of the cleanest cars in Atlanta right now, as I did just finish getting a car
got
wash.
The wash today, huh? It's a big pain in the ass. It's one of the worst things about adulting, I think, is going to get the car wash. It's a frequent...
Yeah, because you have to clean the interior. It's crazy.
It's a frequent thing, unfortunately. Yeah. It's insane how dirty those interiors get, too, man. I mean, I'll tell you...
Man.
Didn't take me long to figure out into getting a vehicle how dirty an interior can get so easily, especially when you're riding with people in a vehicle. It's so much worse. But something that's not dirty and squeaky clean is Guardians of the Galaxy, though. I'll tell you what, this film, to me, upon this revisit, and I don't know how you were feeling, Jose, but it's airtight, man. I really feel like it's an airtight picture. A lot of thoughts
100%.
in my mind with this one, honestly. And look, I'm not saying it's a perfect movie, but I do think it's like the perfect 4-quadrant movie. You know what I mean? Like, this really set a standard for what the current 4-quadrant popcorn flick is going to be. I feel like I think that this is kind of historical in that way, honestly, to how much this really did set up a lot of that. For me, it's got it all. You know what I mean? It's got the humor, it's got the action, it's got the epic feel, it's got the character development, it's got the drama, the emotion, it's got the great music. It has everything that we ask for when we're going to see these big 4-quadrant popcorn flicks, and it's all so well done. And a lot of that is a testament to James Gunn. I think that a lot was riding on this movie when it came out. First of all, it's really the first time I can think of in Marvel Cinematic Universe's history that this is the first time they really took a risk on an auteur filmmaker such as Gunn, because before that, I mean, you could argue maybe Branagh, but Branagh's Thor didn't really feel like a Branagh film necessarily, right? If it just felt like another step in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, it didn't really have the Branagh signature style that we're used to in Thor. It really just felt like the MCU. And Russo's, I guess you could argue to a degree, but even with Winter Soldier, they became auteurs because of the style that they put down on Winter Soldier. So this was a current auteur that they were taking a chance on with Gunn, and this is the first time they did that. And this is more or less the first time I think it's ever been Feige goes to Gunn and pretty much says, what do you want to do? And I think Gunn had the wild idea to say, Guardians of the Galaxy, that's what I want to do. And I think that it's one of the first times where Feige was like, all right, let's give it a shot. And really put all the stake on this one, because this is the first appearance of Thanos. This is the first time we're seeing we're delving into the Infinity Stones, and it's all set up so incredibly well. And I don't think without James Gunn in the seat there, in the driver's seat, you would really have all this done as well as it is. And I think that it's all set up pretty perfectly. What I love about it is, it's more or less if you don't like space movies, no problem. We got a guy in here, main character, Peter Quill, who's you're going to relate to a lot because he's from Earth. You know what I mean? You're going to relate to him. He's kind of from the outside looking in a little bit too. So you have him in this film, you know what I mean? And there's something for everybody in this movie to make it all work and to really start to put into play a lot of the big pieces that we need to make the MCU work, at least leading into Endgame, right? And Infinity War and all that. So a lot of that is in this movie, and the humor alone is humor that just, it works for me, man. 90% of these jokes land, at least, and it's my style of humor. It all feels organic. It feels like these are things these characters would actually say to each other. The characters are all set up to be extremely likable, from, just the first point of the movie. It doesn't take long for you because it starts out with that incredible dramatic scene, right? Whoever that child actor was that got to, cry over his mother, incredible. I don't know who he got for that, but that was awesome. I mean, that scene alone is just so heart-wrenching, and it's so good to start the movie out with because it shows, like, yeah, I think that's one of Gunn's kind of secrets is, yes, it's going to be a funny movie. I do more, he does a more humorous style for sure, but the story comes first,
Right.
and it shows here, man. He really nails that. This movie's just got so much style behind it, and I love that so much. And again, man, I don't think since I'm being honest after rewatching it today, and I'm not saying we're gonna hold it to that, or I'm gonna hold it to that masterpiece level that I do this film, but not since I don't think Raiders of the Lost Ark has a film redefine the four quadrants, genre, or the four quadrant popcorn flick. I think that this has, and I think historically we will look at it as such. I think that this movie's going to be one that stands out from the MCU over time because of it, and this movie is fantastic. I've forgotten how high on my list I actually had this one. I think in my MCU ranking, but it's amazing to me. I love almost every minute of it. I mean, if I had to like point out any gripes, maybe like Glenn Close could have been used a little more. I mean, it felt like that was somebody they put in so they could have the name on the in the credits to maybe try to get people to see it. But other than that, man, I mean, there's not really a whole lot of issues that I have with it. But anyway, Jose, how'd you feel upon this last watch?
I mean, I totally agree with everything you said. Like, I wouldn't hold it to a masterpiece standard, but it definitely is up there with one of my top Marvel movies. To get one of the first introductions of Thanos in this movie
Who's not Josh Brolin?
was really cool.
Clearly,
Who in which actually the first appearance of Thanos was actually in the first Avengers movie in the end credits scene.
Right. But this is the first time he's been in a movie, like not outside.
Right. Yeah. So to see Thanos play a little bit more of a role, because obviously he's not like the main person in this film, like the main villain.
Yeah.
But to see Thanos play a little bit more in this movie was really cool to see. Them go into more details about the Infinity Stones and the history, how they came to be, and all this other stuff was really cool to see. All this backstory into what we now know about the Infinity Stones was all really cool. The way this movie was introduced was really cool. Very sad, but also set up a lot for the Peter Quill, the one that we see now in this film,
right,
and the one that we will see in obviously that we see in the second, and we will probably see in the third. It's really cool. And just this movie in general, like you said, I mean, the laughs that it has is great, and it's not overdone. Where the laughs are put in, like the jokes are put in spots that work. The action is great. All the action's great. All the sad parts, are great as well. Like they're nicely done. They're not overdone as well. It's a very nice balanced movie between sadness, comedy, and action. It's just a great movie all around.
It's crazy to me because I think we were at a time where we were starting to become so desensitized to how great these things can actually be because of the fact, like, you look at this movie, and this is another important thing that this movie did. I mean, talking about the humor, that was something the Russos carried forward into like Infinity War and Endgame from James Gunn.
Yeah.
If you look at their first one, Winter Soldier, it's not a funny movie. They saw Guardians and they're like, we need to carry that over to our films because it really works. And obviously that was probably a mandate too. Like, if you could make the humor work, they probably told him at Marvel, make it work, because it is working with Guardians of the Galaxy here. And I think we became, because Marvel was putting out banger after banger after banger right around this time, we became desensitized to how great these could actually be, because now you're looking at a lot of these misses that we've had with Marvel, and it's not until you go back and see this again that you realize like how hard it is to actually make something like this work. You know what I mean? Which is something that I just think we were getting desensitized to up until this point where we're kind of in this lull with Marvel. And you look at, like, you do need a James Gunn behind the camera. It makes a difference. You need somebody like that to make these movies work. And it really does come back to the director in that sense. Excuse me. But yeah, man, it was just a real risk, I think, that for Marvel to take to do a movie like this, to bet on a James Gunn, to do a something Guardians of the Galaxy, which before this, and it's something else we become so desensitized to because they've become some of our favorite characters in the MCU. A lot of people didn't know who they were, before this movie came out, and it worked, and that's a huge deal, man. It wasn't focused on Captain America, Iron Man, Thor, the big ones. It was focused on these new characters that we had to make work, and it was so successful. And if this movie's not successful, we don't get Ant-Man, we don't get Doctor Strange. I would even dare say we don't get Captain Marvel if this doesn't work. And all of this had to work for it to culminate into what it eventually culminated into. And I mean, this had to be one of those movies that even in the editing room, when they were looking at it, they knew this had to work, right? I mean, this was one of those that just it fires on all cylinders, man. And once they saw it, they were probably like, man, we struck gold with this one. And it does show you like why 100% James Gunn's become such a superstar in the industry today. That's another thing. There were seeds planted in this movie,
and why he will be missed in the MCU.
Yes, absolutely. There are things planted in this movie too, because I look at a movie like this, and I'm just like, Gunn gets it, man, because you're looking at the space stuff. He sets up the intergalactic world of Marvel. I mean, Thor dealt with it a little bit, but this really sets it up and sets up all that lore. And that makes me, not to make this a DC thing, but that gives me so much confidence for his Superman. I think he's going to handle Krypton incredibly well and do all that Kryptonian lore. If nothing else, that stuff will be handled well in his Superman film when I look at this. But the other thing is, like, the other seeds that are planted in here, man, the Nebula and Gamora storyline, it's all planted. Where all that goes, it started here. Like, Gunn had that very carefully worked out, because this relationship, it's brutal. It's a brutal relationship. It's toxic, and we're seeing the seeds of that here, where when we first saw the movie in the movie theater or whatever, we might have been like, you know what I mean? Like, written off the Nebula character because she is just a villain. But when you're really looking at what it all culminated to between Guardians 2 and Endgame and dare I say the holiday special, like, it all culminated to something pretty cool with Nebula. Like, she really became a huge character and one of the big players and a much better character. And when I rewatch it, I appreciate what she does here more because it's really planted in there very subtly, but I enjoyed that stuff. Groot is one of the most quoted, I think, Marvel characters that we've had. I mean, everybody was saying I Am Groot when this movie came out. And the reason why is because the humor worked, like we said. Like, Groot isn't taking away from the focus of the movie. Like, when there are jokes like that, there's no taking away from the focus of the main story at hand. Like, Groot is saying I am Groot in moments that not only are building his character, but also moments that are emotional. Like, we saw the We Are Groot switch up there toward the end, which that scene gets me every time. There's without a doubt.
My gosh, yeah, that scene. Yeah, I mean, that scene always gets me every time I watch it. It's just so emotional, man.
Yeah,
it's crazy.
I am a by the way, Rocket Raccoon fanatic, and I have been since this movie. I think that he is my favorite one of the Guardians. I know I might be in the minority on that, but I am loving one of the things about another seed that was planted with Rocket. I mean, we're seeing in the beginning here, that they set him up like he was pretty much an experiment, and I think we're going to see a lot of that leading into Guardians 3, and I can't wait to dive more into Rocket's story there as well with Guardians 3 coming here. And I thought that was just a really interesting thing that's also just very much planted in the beginning of this movie. Like, again, like I said, the movie, James Gunn gets it. He understood the comics, I think, so well to be able to adapt this to the screen in a way that just your average, again, this is why I call it a perfect 4-quadrant film, because your average audience member can walk into this and stay with the characters in every single moment of it. Like, the plot never feels convoluted. Like, we have seen even some of the better Marvel movies dive into their sort of side B plots and they start to become a little bit convoluted in those sections. This doesn't have any of that. I really felt like I was with every moment of these B plots and these sort of extra bits that are set up in this movie. Like every bit of that, you're with it, and it's not hard to follow. It's really easy to follow. Like it just gets it, man. It knows what excuse me, it needs to be for everybody who's watching it to be on the same page. Like it doesn't matter again who you are, what genre of film you like. This is a movie for everybody, and then I think that's part of why it's going to be so looked upon as one of the best MCU films, you know, in our history. Like, and this is one of the first times. Like, I don't know. I'll ask you. Like, do you remember seeing it the first time and how you felt about it? Like when you first seen it, or how was that for you?
Yeah. So I remember the first time I watched it in theaters. It was in I was in high school, and it was my I want to say no, I was in middle school. I was in eighth grade. I think it was my last year of middle school, and um, I remember going with a bunch of my friends then in middle school. We were all like really excited because we were all like pretty big into Marvel at the time, um, and we were just really excited for this because this was like the first time where they were going to do something different in Marvel. So we were all like really excited to see what this movie would bring. And I remember coming out of the theater, like, first of all, I remember that our theater was super packed. The showing that we went to for the first time, I watched Guardians in the theaters. And I remember coming out of the movies and talking to my friends. We all absolutely loved the hell out of the movie. The story, everything about the movie was great. I remember bumping into some other random people and talking to them about it. We all just kind of bonded over how great the movie was and how much fun we had watching the movie. I mean, during the movie, we were all just having a great time with it, a great laugh. Again, like I said, loving the action, the different like the different angles that James Gunn took with this Guardians movie compared to like the previous Marvel movies that we had gotten previously. It was great to see. It was a great refresher in like of like seeing something different in the MCU.
Absolutely. Like I remember this thing coming out, and granted, I think that was one of the big draws. I mean, it had the Marvel name on it, you know, and Marvel was starting to become
right
established as over, you know, this shared universe, right, to a degree. But I don't think like everybody like understood like how connected this would actually be. But I do know that like because we were coming hot off Winter Soldier, right, and then that movie was wildly successful, you know. So I think like a lot of people were pretty much, you know, like, yeah, we're gonna go see every Marvel movie, and I was too. But I do know that the title of Guardians of the Galaxy definitely had me a bit hesitant for sure. The only difference was, or the only thing was, I guess when this was coming out, like I was a James Gunn fan. I didn't realize this was his next project. I remember seeing the trailer and like I honestly didn't realize this was the next James Gunn movie as well. Once I figured that out, I immediately took myself to see it, you know, and I remember just being so delighted because I was just like, man, the guy, he really can do anything. You know, he really he's able to direct a movie like this. Now, granted, it's a bit more of a tamed James Gunn that we're seeing. I mean, we've seen James Gunn do unhinged James Gunn when you're watching something like the Suicide Squad for sure. But you know, it's so fantastic. I mean, like, and you walk out of it like with a smile on your face. That's another big important thing, and another reason I think that it is like the perfect four quadrant movie. You're walking out with a smile, like, and it makes sure of that. Like, there's no way you're walking out of this movie without a smile on your face. The score is fantastic. The soundtrack, James Gunn really picks the best music. That's a trademark of his. That's one of his huge signatures of all of his movies, is his music that he picks for it. And it really, really works out here. And it's a lot of classics that everybody knows, which I think is another reason that it just has such a big draw to it. You know, a lot of people, most of the songs, you know them already, but there's songs that are just so perfectly placed in all the scenes, you know, what they're used for. And also, I would say songs that you wouldn't expect to see in a comic book film. I think that's something else we have to mention here too. Like, these songs, it's a lot more common now, but at the time, I don't think they were using these types of songs in like comic book movies as much. The only caveat I would say to that is like AC/DC used for Iron Man, but outside of that, like, you didn't really see it a lot.
But yeah, and again, even that in Iron that was just in like one scene of Iron Man.
Right.
Whereas in this movie they used like all different classics throughout the entire movie, which
Yeah.
I absolutely love, especially now, watching it, now when I'm, older and my musical taste has changed. And I'm into these like older songs, watching it and getting to just sing along to those
Yeah.
songs is just, it's a great experience. I love it.
Yeah. That
And I
trip.
can't wait to see I can't wait to see what songs they use in the third movie. That should
Right.
be interesting. For
Right.
sure.
No, for sure. He's
Yeah.
going to pick some great songs. Like, I have complete faith that the soundtrack's going to be good, if nothing else, but for volume 3. But I also think that another thing about that is the fact that it's like, you look at like something like the cherry bomb scene, right? It's epic, man. It's epic seeing the Guardians come together, for the first time as a real team when we're hearing Cherry Bomb there, and it's just so they use it. It's used in such a way that has an epic feel to it, and sometimes just a humorous feel too, where it's like the beginning of the scene or the beginning of the movie where Quill is listening to his Walkman and he's dancing around the planet, and I
He's
cannot
dancing.
watch
Yeah,
that
I
scene
love that. I
anymore.
love that.
I can't watch that scene anymore without thinking about Nebula and Don Cheadle on the other end of that, looking at him dancing with no music and then saying, "Oh, he's an idiot." I'll never forget that from Endgame. Every time I see that scene, I'll look at it that way now. But it's so funny. It's hilarious. It starts out making you feel really good. It's got an amazing opening credit sequence, like with that going on behind it. Some of the smaller characters even just pop out. I mean, I would argue Yondu is a smaller character in this movie. He's not a big character. He's a supporting character in this one, and he's fantastic. Michael Rooker knocks that role out of the park, man. And he really does. And it's one of those actors that you wouldn't expect to see in an A-list movie like this, but man, is he good. Like, James Gunn saw that. He was like, I'm going to take a slightly more B-list actor, put him in here, and it really works for Yondu. And you there are more layers to Yondu, obviously, moving into volume 2, which we'll talk about then, but you do get a sense of who he is for sure, and he really plays and works. And even some of the humorous scenes with Yondu, like when he's in the shop and he's sitting there, that's hysterical. Like that stuff really plays.
It's so funny.
It's like, man, this guy's a dick, but he's so funny the way he's going about it. Sean Gunn, James Gunn's brother, is standing behind him, trying not to laugh. I love his character too. He's one of the smaller players, but he's fantastic, dude. Like, I love that he was brought into this fold as well. And then if we're going to talk about the main characters, I think that's kind of something we need to dive into, because that's who really, makes this movie up. Is you got Chris Pratt as Star-Lord. That was another thing, man. Taking the risk on Pratt for this, because Chris Pratt was not the Chris Pratt we know today when he did this movie. This threw Chris Pratt into superstardom. We have to remember that as well. That was another big thing for this movie. Chris Pratt,
Right.
there for a minute, everybody wanted him to be their leading man after this came out. Like, he was such a good lead in this, and he is a good lead in this. He's got the charisma. He got into incredible shape to play this role compared to what he was at anyway, and he really nails it, man. I really think he does. The ending, dude, like, where
For sure.
he's looking, Gamora, take my hand, and he sees his mother. Like, he's given a really good dramatic performance there too. It's not just the comedic side.
Oh
of
my
it.
gosh, yeah.
He's a very,
Yeah, for
very
sure.
talented actor. Like, this really showed that off. And I gotta say, dude, I gotta hand it to Chris Pratt for playing Star-Lord, dude, because I don't see anybody else connected to that now. Like, it's Chris Pratt. That's one of those things. And again, like, because Chris Pratt, he's Mario now, for crying out loud, because he is the leading man and everything anymore. It's really, like, it's another thing I think we get desensitized to. But with the right script and the right role, dude, he does nail it. He does nail being a leading man in an A-list movie like this. Like, he is a very, very good actor. Like, there's no doubt about it. And I loved every minute of his moments in this one. I loved seeing this introduction to Star-Lord, and the personality he brings to it just really establishes who this character is, man.
And it's just it's also the chemistry that Dave Bautista, Zoe Saldana, Chris Pratt, and all of them have together in this movie. Like, the chemistry that they eventually build up, like, to be able to go from complete strangers and people that are trying to kill each other to then, becoming a team, the Guardians of the Galaxy, shows how good of a chemistry that, all five of them have to be able to come together, like, to be able to go from wanting to kill each other to being this team. It's really cool to see. It shows that James Gunn knows what he's doing, and that he knows, he brought the right people for the right roles, for sure.
Well, Batista's one I definitely want to highlight here because, first of all,
I love his performance.
I think this movie, and we'll talk about it more in part 2, but I think this movie's my favorite iteration of Drax that we've had so far was in this film. I definitely think it's the perfect balance of the humor and the badassery. I think he just nailed it here. But that was something that I think Gunn took a risk on himself. Was he knows at this point in time anyway, and he's got much better. But Dave Bautista's not, the greatest thespian in the world. However, given the right lines, he's the perfect Drax, and he is the perfect Drax. There's no point of Dave Bautista's performance in this film that I feel like I want to cringe. He is so fantastic as Drax. Like, every line that he was given was delivered perfectly because Gunn wrote it that way. He knew what to tell him to say and all that kind of stuff. So he's the perfect Drax. And, Zoe Saldana is another one too, where it's like, she's done obviously Avatar before this, and so she had the A-list clout, but it wasn't, again, I don't think that she would be the star she is today without this. Still, I think that she still needed.
She's really good at. She's really good at playing characters that are of color, like aliens, basically.
Yeah, it's like of colors that we wouldn't see on our real world. Yeah, I mean, blue people, green people.
Exactly.
She's got it. It's an odd thing, but she's very good at this. But yeah, it's yeah, Gamora definitely is very good in the movie. I definitely think that there's more to her by the time we get to Volume 2, which we'll talk about more. But
and also seeing her backstory in, what was it, Infinity War, when they really go more into depth of Thanos going to her planet and showing how he attacked and wiped her entire planet and did the whole knife balancing on her finger trick and stuff like that. I think that was the best Gamora that we've probably gotten. It was in when it was with the stuff between Thanos and Gamora.
Yeah,
that was definitely probably the best that I had seen of Gamora.
Yeah,
I mean, she was good in this movie. It was a great introduction to Gamora, but that movie was probably the best that I had seen of Gamora. For sure.
No, yeah, definitely. I mean, there's a lot more development for Gamora down the line that this movie didn't have, but it was still a good. It
was a great introduction to her, for sure. Yeah,
character, and also just the relationship between her and Quill that had to work before anything else, I think, because the scene where he, basically doesn't exactly sacrifice himself, but to a degree does, because he takes the mask off.
He right, and he's putting it on her to save her life.
It's such a good scene to kind of end out the second act too, because it really does put your characters into a spot where they don't have any other choice. Like, Quill had no other choice in that moment other than to call Yondu. And then that is really what throws us into the third act there, and
it's also, it also shows that this is the first person that, Peter Quill actually has feelings for.
Right.
Because obviously we know from the beginning of this movie, he was a player. He would just get with whoever and whatever that was walking. But it wasn't until finally Gamora came to his life that he finally actually started growing feelings. And she was the one that got him to essentially basically sacrifice himself for her.
Yeah. Yeah. It was a great impactful scene, man. It really did put our characters in a poor position, but that's the best kind of thing. That's what you have to do as a writer, man. That's the job of the writer, and I hate to talk about writers right now during the strike that's going on, but like, honestly, as a writer, like, that's a really good point that we're bringing up here, because it is your job to write our characters, or I'll put it this way. It's not about any writer, I think, can write themselves into a corner. And that's what Gunn does right there. He wrote himself into a corner, and I think you should. But it's all about how do you get yourself out of that corner? You know what I mean? Like, how do you get your characters out of the corner And I think
It's true, yeah.
those are the best writers to me, are the ones that can actually do that, at least for writers that are doing like actual like plot driven films such as this one. You do need to be able to write the characters into a corner for us to really feel something, but then also figure out a smooth way to get them out of that corner. And that's exactly what Gunn did, leading us to the third act here. And I thought that was just brilliant and very well done.
I just want to give a shout out to my boy Dr. Groot. That was one of the best scenes in this movie.
Yeah. When he pokes up, when he pokes the hole in Drax. Yeah, that was another one too, man. But we're talking about Vin Diesel with a very limited amount of lines, and honestly,
man,
provides amazing
this is the
lines. I mean, like he provides voice.
3 words.
Provides voice though. But it's also, true. I feel like it's kind of a twofold thing. Like, one, you get the name Vin Diesel on this movie, right? But the second part of it is like Gunn is almost like using this in a self-aware way, where he's self-aware of how absurd a human being Vin Diesel is, right? And like he's kind of like, we're gonna use him for 3 lines. It's gonna be funny. Like casting Vin Diesel is almost a joke within itself. I like that, you know. But yeah, go ahead.
No, so I was gonna say that the whole Rocket Groot relationship almost reminds me of like Han Solo and Chewbacca, because like Chewbacca doesn't say any words; he just makes noises, and obviously Han Solo understands what Chewbacca is saying. Same way Rocket understands what Groot is saying. So like it's like that kind of relationship, and I almost see this whole Guardians crew as like Han Solo with Luke and Leia and Chewbacca and all them, and like their Millennium Falcon. The Guardians have like their own Millennium Falcon type ship, and like Groot's like the Chewbacca of the group, and then Han Solo is Star-Lord, Gamora's Leia, and it's just it's now that I really think about it, it's crazy how that you see that inspiration there that James Gunn has taken obviously from
this,
for sure, yeah, and it's just great to see, honestly.
I'm actually really glad you brought that up, because one of the scenes I was going to bring up is when Rocket gets them out of the jail, right? And Gamora looks at him and is like, you turned off the gravity from the outside, you know what I mean? That line is pretty much the Princess Leia line, where Leia looks at Han and says, what's the line? I can't remember per word. It's in Empire. You do have your ideas, not many of them, but you do have them. That line that Gamora said, it might as well have been that, but it wasn't that. I thought James Gunn did a really good homage there without actually having to repeat that line. Like, you understand the influence, but the line is different. Everything and that's testament to Zoe Saldana right there, and how good she is in the role, because you do know what she's saying when she says that. She doesn't have to say it so explicitly like we saw Princess Leia do in Empire. Nothing wrong with that, but it was just the way that Zoe Saldana delivered the line. You knew everything that was going through her mind right there. She was pretty much telling Rocket what Leia told Han in Empire Strikes Back about him sometimes having good ideas. Like, you are an idiot, but you do have good ideas sometimes, right? And that's kind of the whole idea that I think Gamora was trying to get across to Rocket right there. And Rocket Raccoon, because we got to talk about my guy here, because my favorite character in all of
Bradley Cooper.
Bradley Cooper's the voice he provides for this role is so good, man. So attached. Like, I think the 2 most essential pieces to the Guardians of the Galaxy are Chris Pratt's Star-Lord and Rocket, or Bradley Cooper's Rocket. Right, because I think those 2 are just so they're the least interchangeable. Like, now, I wouldn't want anybody else to play these roles, but I would say of all the characters, those 2 are the least interchangeable, and I think that we're gonna see a lot more of that starting in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, or we're going to see more evidence of that, because I think those 2, and this is just my theory, I could be completely wrong, but I think that their relationship is going to go through some real big trials and tribulations in Volume 3. And I think that it is a lot of the heart of it. I mean, you have the heart with Groot and Rocket and all that, but I think that we'll talk more about this in Volume 2, but when you progress through these movies, we are seeing the relationship of Quill and Rocket develop. I think they are the 2 focuses here that, again, subtly planted seeds here in this first one, but it's there. It's still kind of there when when they bicker and all that. You know, those two have a very specific type of relationship that I think is going places that is going to really pay
Very
off
true.
toward the end. And again, not so present in this one, of course, but like I said, it is planted very subtly, like everything else that Gunn planted here. This movie is so focused, man. It has focus on the goal. It doesn't ever veer off the path. It really knows what it wants to be. It goes there. It has it all. It's all done and confined, and I don't mean confined in a bad way, but confined in a 3-act structure that, again, we've come to know so well since this movie, I would say. I think it really did redefine the popcorn genre flick. I think everybody wanted to imitate this, what James Gunn did in this movie after this. Like, I think we've seen evidence of that after this movie. Like, it's nobody's been able to do it, in my opinion. I think that I'm not saying that this is my favorite movie of all time or favorite Marvel movie necessarily, but I don't think anybody's been able to imitate the style of what this movie has specifically, is kind of what I'm getting at. Like, Gunn did put his own signature touch,
sure.
and you don't get it without Gunn. It needs to be there. And again, it goes into what you said earlier. It's kind of going to be sad to have to say goodbye to him too in this third movie. Like, we're not just saying goodbye to these characters in the final installment, but we're also going to have to say goodbye to James Gunn as a filmmaker. We won't have that influence as much, in the MCU, which is, it's sad, because Gunn, you look at him and it makes sense to me why he was kind of at one point in time being primed to really as Kevin Feige's number 2. He Feige was really going to Gunn a lot about, these types of things. And then there was, we won't get into cancel culture, but there was the whole mess with Gunn there for a minute where he wasn't going to do Guardians 3. And he's obviously since come back from that even stronger at this point. But man, it does, you do need that signature touch on this. And I can't say it enough, but the other thing that I wanted to say about this movie that I just think really works incredibly well is, again, we've already talked about the comedy a little bit, but it's the fact that the comedy is, it develops character. Like, every time there's a joke, I feel like we're getting something revealed about the character. You know what I mean? Like in the beginning, early on, Drax doesn't understand metaphors. We know that. Like, it's played as a joke, but it developed the character. Quill's, this place would look like a Jackson Pollock painting. It's given us more details about that character. Like I love the way that character development is balanced within that humor. Like, you're right, dude. It's like, it's not over jokey, but yet it's one of the funniest MCU movies we've ever had. It's kind of this
100%
weird balance.
Yeah. And I mean, there's also that scene with when Peter Quill came back from taking back his the song whatever that is, the recorder for his songs.
Yeah.
And he comes up and Drax is like, you'd make a worthy adversary against Throne, and he's like, what'd you sacrifice your life for? He showed it to Drax. Drax is like, you imbecile.
Amazing.
It's like he went from you'd be a worthy adversary to you're an imbecile so quick. It's so funny. Man, Drax is just, it's his comedy. It's like he doesn't mean to be funny, but he's just funny.
It's
you know what I mean?
accident.
It's like exactly. Yeah. It's great.
Quill's a guy who I think thinks he's more badass and funnier than he actually is, and almost that within itself becomes funny, and it's all about how Pratt plays it off, and Gamora is pretty much a straight man throughout this whole thing. I mean, she's not really the jokiest character, but you need her there to balance it. You need somebody on the team like her to balance it, which is another testament to Saldana's work here. Again, like I said, it's not as involved as later, but you do need her. If she's not in the movie, this team doesn't get balanced out at all. Rocket is pretty much the most confident man on the galaxy, I would say. Like, he's a raccoon, but he's so confident, maybe overconfident in his own skills, but he is good at what he does, but he knows it, and that's kind of a big issue. And I like the dynamic there. But yeah, go ahead.
I also like the node to Space Invaders that he did in this movie at the end when they're fighting Ronin's ships. You know, Rocket and all of them are just literally facing up. Like, it kind of brought me back to when I was in the arcade playing Space Invaders, trying to knock out all those evil ships. But it also kind of reminded me of Pixels, the Adam Sandler and
I can
Kevin
see that.
James movie,
Yeah,
when they got attacked, like their Earth got attacked by aliens, and they had to protect their Earth from them. So kind of gave me that, which obviously Pixels came out after Guardians,
right.
but it kind of like thinking back, to those two movies, it kind of has that similar feel to it, from in my opinion. But obviously Guardians is a little more of a sci-fi feel, whereas Pixels is more of like the arcade feel.
Yeah, well, I'll jump in here before Josh comes in and beheads you for talking about Pixels. But the thing is like when I think about those scenes that you're talking about, to jump off of those points, it's like the movie has actual style to it. You know what I mean? Like it really, really does have actual style, and that's another thing about this when I was watching it. It is visually one of the best looking Marvel movies we've had too. And before this, the big game in town was Avengers. I mean, Winter Soldier was very successful. Don't get me wrong. A lot of people love that. But Winter Soldier, this is when I go back into the 4 quadrant movie here. Winter Soldier, it's a very niche market. It was still, I think, a little bit more of a niche market. It's more of a political thriller, which only appeals to a lot of people, obviously, because a lot of us live in a world with politics. But it's also kind of niche in that way. It was successful to its audience.
Yeah, it's a niche in the fact that it's a niche, as in like the people who are really into politics, the ones who are really gonna like that movie.
Yeah, and that's
sure.
a lot of people, and a lot of people saw it multiple times, and it was one of their biggest successes, and I still hold it as one of the best. But this movie, again, when people were walking out of this one, you heard from the masses, man, this one's better than Avengers. And my reaction to that was always like, nah, no way. You know what I mean? And like, I'm not saying it is. I still hold Avengers very high, that first one. But what I will say is,
the first Avengers is
right.
it's amazing.
It's amazing. But what I will say about this one is it does rival that first Avengers movie. Like, people were not kidding when that hype came out. It does rival it at the very least. And if people,
it does for sure.
If people like it more, it doesn't surprise me at all, man. It's up there. It definitely deserves that praise. And that's another testament to the movie as well, because when we saw Avengers, it felt like nothing could rival that. You know what I mean? Maybe Avengers 2, which certainly did not, but
which really, I mean, Avengers 2 is like one of the worst Avengers movies.
It's the worst of them, and yeah, it's this movie rivaled it, and that's saying a lot about again, a team that we didn't really know much about. Like, a lot of the average moviegoer did not know about the Guardians of the Galaxy, and that says a lot that they came out of it like, yeah, this is better than Avengers. Like, a lot of people had that reaction. I don't blame anybody with that, because again, it rivals it for me, at least. Avengers still a little bit higher on the list, I think, but rivals it, and that's hard to do, man. It's hard to make a good movie, let alone something that appeals to people this much. And that to me, I loved hearing that reaction when people came out of it, because it really did it inspired me to go see it even more. And I was just so surprised that this, again, little rinky-dink filmmaker at the time, James Gunn, I was a big fan of at the time. It was so surprising to see him explode with this thing and just become the rock star that he is today. But yeah, this movie to me is,
I'm just glad that I had something else to talk to people about at the time, because
of course.
I mean, yes, we had the Avengers movie and a couple others, but to get something different and a new feeling from Marvel to talk about was really, really good. Well, I really appreciate them releasing this.
Well, that's exactly the thing. Like, it all felt so exciting. Like, you wanted to go out and buy merchandise for this thing, right? Like, which is part of the goal when you're trying to make these big 4 quadrant movies, like, because you want people to feel so attached to the stuff. And like, this is a movie, when I watched it, it was like, this movie defines what I love in movies. Like this style of humor works for me. It felt like the humor was written for me. It works for me, and it felt like the characters were characters I love. Rocket especially. I have a Rocket shirt and a Rocket hat that I'm looking at right now. I love that character, man. It has, but other people are more favorable to Groot. Other people are more favorable to Star-Lord. Like, you have characters for everybody in here, and that's another thing that just makes it work. Like you and I talk about our favorite thing in the world is Star Wars. The reason that we hold that in such high praise is because there's something for everybody in there. You know, everybody has a different thing that they take away from Star Wars. Again, not putting this on the level of like New Hope or Empire, but what I'm saying is it carries over that philosophy of the most successful movies are going to be the ones that are made for everybody. Everybody can take something away from it. And again, historically speaking, I think we're going to look back on this, not far enough removed yet, but we're going to look back on it and say, yeah, this is one of the best comic book movies ever made. Like, there's no doubt. It's got to go in the top 15 at the very least, right? I mean, it's up there, man. It really is. And it's
for sure
huge. I mean, I would argue top 10. I mean, it really is that good to me. I really love it. But I think that, one of the things that, it's really hard to like sit there and like poke at things in this movie because again, like everything is going to be extremely nitpicky. I mean, I would say the only thing that bogs this movie down, if anything, is the fact that it's nitpicky, but again, like the only thing that can really bog this movie down entirely would be the fact that it is still held to the confines of where the MCU was going. But again, it's hard to say that even bogs it down because it doesn't really, because it really works within the universe and also is its own standalone. By the way, another thing I want to point out, this is one of those that worked that didn't need anybody else from the MCU. It really works on its own in this movie in particular.
It definitely does, yeah.
Like with the exception of Thanos, who wasn't really established yet, you don't have these like cameos from players that we'd seen. We don't have Iron Man, Captain America, Thor, or anybody showing up here as a cameo or fan service, really. That's a great thing about this movie. It's not littered with fan service, yet I feel just as good about it as if I did watch a movie that had a lot of fan service. Like that's another thing that you gotta give this movie a lot of praise for, and if anything, a little bit better, because it does feel a lot more original and fresh when you watch it. Fresh is a word I would give this movie. It felt very fresh at the time because again, these were all new people. This is new. These are new characters, a new team, with a great storyline that again just was made for everybody. And at the end of the day, that's what's gonna make this one stand the test of time, I think. It's because when this whole thing ends, when we're on Avengers 42 or whatever, the children of that age, they're not gonna sit there and they're not gonna watch all the Marvel movies. There's gonna be a select few, honestly, that stand the test of time, and it's gonna be movies like Guardians that really do work on their own. It stands on its own 2 feet. It doesn't need everything else for you to watch it and be entertained by it. You can actually watch this as its own original product. I said the same thing about Black Panther too. Like I think that those two movies in very different ways, they stand on their own 2 feet. They really do, because they're not attached to everything else. They're in the universe, but you don't need all these different cameos and attachments, and it sets up things for later, but it also works in the confines of its own story. So I don't know. That's kind of where I'm at with it, but yeah, dude.
No, for sure, yeah.
It's awesome. It's awesome. If you guys like honestly haven't watched Guardians out there, like Guardians of the Galaxy, you need to watch this movie. It's for everybody. It really is. Like I don't think I could sit there and say your kids can watch it, and there's edgier jokes in there for adults, but nothing too bad that the kids are gonna be, traumatized by it or anything like that. It's not unhinged James Gunn like we've seen with the Suicide Squad. It's a tamer one, and he works really well in the confines of that, and that's it's a movie for everybody, man. And really quick, Jose, who did the score for this one? Because I really think again that needs to be praised too, because the score is so epic, man. I know we've already kind of complimented it, but I forgot who did the score, and I forgot to look it up. But
Tyler Bates.
Yeah, Tyler Bates, man, amazing score. The score was awesome
for sure. I mean, definitely need to shout him up, because I, again, like me, someone who's trying to get into doing music for movies and stuff, it's always, you know, cool to shout them out because they do an incredible job. If it wasn't for them, the movies wouldn't have the same feels that they do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100%, man. I think he just added a whole new layer of excellence and epicness to this with his score, man, and it really, really worked. Sound design was awesome in this thing too, by the way. I just wanted to throw that out there. I think, or mixing too, sound mixing, especially mixing in the music to the action sequences. I mean, that's something you got to do well. You got to be good at your job to make that stuff work, and the sound mixing is something that not lost on me when I watched this one for sure. It definitely really works. It's firing on all cylinders here. So that's another thing. Like I said, it's visually beautiful. And by the way, I do want to shout out really quick here because we saw in the opening credits executive producer Victoria Alonso, who was really in charge of the VFX there at Marvel and primed to possibly take over Feige's job as well, along with Gunn at the time. Maybe once Feige left anyway, is my point, that her and Gunn were kind of two people that were kind of there at the number 2 spot. But anyway, she's gone now. You know, she left. She got fired essentially, and that's kind of insane to think about. But it really did, honestly, just seeing the name in the beginning, it made me wonder about the future VFX of Marvel a little bit, because she really did have such a big part of what makes something like this look so good. I'm not saying that Marvel made the mistake by firing her. They have every right to. She breached her contract, so I'm not trying to get into the controversy of that. I'm just saying that's they had every right to do what they did. It's just more or less like, damn, dude, like, she clearly has an impact. She's clearly good at her job when it comes to doing the job, that part of it. The breaching the contract is a different story, but her doing her job, she knew what she was doing when it came to supervising VFX. Because I'll tell you what, 8 years later, all the CGI looks good. That's something I want to point out too, because there's not a minute of CGI in here where I'm like, that looks wonky. No, it all still looks great. It's used as sparingly as it can be. I mean, I did notice there was a lot of built sets here too. Wasn't reliant on the volume stage like we get a lot of now. There were a lot of built practical sets that really do make this movie look good, and the CGI is used as a tool, as it should be, not as something you rely on. So to get your surroundings and environments. So love all that, and that's really it, man. That's our discussion on this. Unless you had anything else you want to add about this, I mean, you want to close it out with some more words, or okay. All right, well, look, guys, we're gonna get going, but before we get out of here,
it's overall a great movie, honestly.
We do have to grade this one, and I think
that's it, really.
Here, I'm gonna say a must-watch for this one. What do you got on that?
Oh yeah, for sure, definitely a must-watch. If you haven't seen it yet, then what's wrong with you at this point? Just watch it. It's great. And if you have seen it, I just want to say it's a good movie to, you know, go back to and kind of refresh on. Maybe it's been a while. Maybe you haven't seen it in a couple years or whatever. Just revisit it. It's a really good watch, honestly.
It's one of the few times I can honestly almost guarantee you will walk out with a smile on your face. You'll leave the movie with a smile.
For sure.
There's not a lot of movies I can guarantee that with, but this one is a guarantee. You will leave smiling and with a good feeling and happy, and that's part of it, and I love it for that, and definitely a must watch. But we are going to get out of here. We do have to cram in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. We're pre-recording these, as you could probably tell. But yeah, we're going to leave. I've been Don Martino. Thank you guys so much for watching today. Before I get out of here, too, I want Mr. Jose Espinel to be able to shout out where people can find him. Where can people find you, sir?
Yeah. As you guys see, other side. As you guys see here, all my socials are extract gaming _ Also, go over to follow me on Twitch, because I stream a lot of games over there. I currently am streaming The Last of Us, Jedi Survivor, Resident Evil 2. It's great. It's great fun. If you want some jump scares and you want to watch me crap myself, then definitely head over to my Twitch.
Yeah, make sure you do go follow Jose on Twitter, Instagram, Twitch, the car wash, wherever you want to go see him. That would be fantastic for us. And it really does help him out. He's doing some great streams over there for Twitch. Also, please follow me over at Dom_Martino_ on Twitter, and then Dom_Martino_ official on Instagram. And then you can follow the Extract Media pages right there at Extract Media blog. Please, before we get out of here, do us all a favor, hit the like button below, subscribe to the channel, leave some feedback in the comment section, share this with your friends, and hit the bell for notifications. And this has been our Guardians of the Galaxy rewatch. Hope you guys enjoyed it, and we will talk to you guys later.
See you.